Welcome back to Grow Your Impact, Income, and Influence, the #1 show for reaching millions of people online. I'm your host, Steve Werner. Today, I am joined by Dove Gordon. Dove runs Profitable Relationships, profitablерelationships.com. I met Dove last week, runs an amazing mastermind, and I wanted to bring him onto the show. And he actually had an idea. He was like, I really want to actually interview you and turn the mic around. I thought that was a great idea. So this show is going to be completely different than anything we have done before. Help me welcome Dove to the stage. Dove, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Steve. Thanks for having me. I look forward to it. I wanted to interview you because you've got great stories.
Thanks.
You've done some great things, and I thought, well, I mean, I have to imagine that many of your listeners, if not most, don't even know. We tend to assume often that the things that we know, everybody knows. So I figured it could be very interesting to people who are already in your audience.
I agree. I mean, it is true. Like we think everybody knows our stories, but you can never tell them enough, and most people don't. So first off, thank you so much for offering to interview me. That is a gift, and it was really cool to think of. Secondly, like you have a really cool story. We're going to put you on the podcast here in a little bit, but we'll get to that later, I guess.
Today we focus on Steve Werner. Where are you from, Steve?
Originally,
where'd you grow
up? Small town Pennsylvania. Originally born in Hershey, and then grew up between Philly and Harrisburg. My parents split, and I split my time between Philadelphia and a small town called Findlay, Ohio. It's the home of Ben Roethlisberger. If you're a Steelers fan, you know he came from there. That's it. Though small town.
Yeah. Well, Hershey. Is there anything in Hershey other than Hershey?
Chocolate. So it is the home of Hershey's chocolate. So if you like Hershey's bars with almonds, that's one of my favorites. Yes. Reese's peanut butter cups. The whole town smells like chocolate.
That's like, almost can't do better than that unless you add coffee.
There's coffee shops there. There's coffee shops. They actually have so there's a place called Hershey Park, and it's a little
I was there as a kid.
Okay. Yeah, you know all about
little. I remember it as big, but I was little.
Right. We went there every summer growing up. I mean, it's the whole town smells like chocolate. Then you go to this amusement park. They sell chocolate. They have rides, and they have a tour of the chocolate factory that's like on a monorail that you go through. It's kind of like the Epcot We Are the World thing, only it's all about chocolate.
Got it. So you're splitting your time between Pennsylvania and Ohio, I think you said?
Yeah. Growing up, my dad and my step family lived in Philly. So I would go spend time with them during the summer, usually either Thanksgiving or Christmas and Easter. I would go out there. I would spend time with them. So I had 3 stepsisters, which were awesome because I grew up as an only child. So I was happy to have some siblings. That was in Philly, big city. And then the school year I would spend in Findlay, Ohio. And then actually my mom was a teacher at a county school. So county school is a smaller school, K through 12, outside of the city. So my graduating class was 28 people, super small, going back and forth.
I hope you weren't in the bottom of such a small class, but you don't have to tell us.
I think I sneaked into, I always tell people I graduated 18th in my class. I just don't tell them that there were 27 people in it.
Well, you know what, the other thing, of course, is, it's usually, how does that go? I think Dan Kennedy, who I know you will probably end up mentioning later as well, but was it him? I'm sure someone else gets credit for this. Was it that how does it work that B players hire A players or something like that. B students hire the A student. I forget how it goes, but
A students hire the. No, I've heard. I know what you're saying, but I can't remember. It's like the A students hire A players, or no, we're getting it all wrong.
Yeah. Well, you can look it up. So Anyway, so where'd you go after that? You moved college?
I went to college, small college, north of Columbus, Ohio. Looked a lot like Harry Potter land. Classic, like stone architecture, super small town.
I'm going to interrupt us. All right. I found it. Steve Jobs has a saying that A players hire A players, B players hire C players, C players hire D players. I don't think that's what I was looking for.
That's okay. I mean,
All
that's
right.
true. That
So
is
you,
that
yeah,
Steve Jobs is correct.
yeah.
Um,
But okay. Anyway, so everyone, you can search for that if you're looking for it, but that's not the quote I was looking for, but it's pretty good. All right. In real time here. Yeah. So you went to a small college.
Went to a small college. Dropped out my freshman year because I had dated a girl that I thought we were going to get married and all of that. So I ended up dropping out. I also, to be really honest, had no clue what I wanted to do. Um, I was kind of told that, you have to go to school, you have to go to college. My mom was a very, very firm believer in that. I was not, but I went because she said I needed to. Um, Ended up dropping out for 2 years. And I think it's one of the best things that happened to me. People told me I'd never go back to college, blah, blah, blah. My life was going to be a downward spiral. And like, this was the start of like me just being like, kind of giving the middle finger to everybody that says stuff like that. Cause I was just like, whatever, like I'm here, I'm having fun, I'm making good money. So at the time I waited tables. I worked at a place called Ponderosa, and then I was at Applebee's. Um,
Where were you?
Findlay, Ohio. I went
Oh,
back.
still in Findlay. Okay. So back
Yeah,
to Findlay, Ohio.
so I went to small college north of Columbus, which was about a 2-hour drive. And then when I dropped out of school, I ended up moving back home. I was going to get an apartment, and my mom was like, no, 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 you are staying here. I think she wanted to try to get me back into school too. And I just told her, I was like, why do you care? Like,
Yeah.
I understand why she wanted me to have a better life, yada, 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 all that stuff. But like, I was making good money. I was taking care of myself. I worked. I mean, we didn't talk about growing up that much, but I mean, I worked from the time I was 8 onward. I went to college with money in my pocket. I had like 15K in the bank when I went to school. When I came home from school, I still had plenty of money. Um, I worked all the time, and I liked work. I think that's one of the secrets of like a fulfilling life, is to enjoy what you do. And it's not the grass is always greener, there's a job that I'm going to like better somewhere else. It's teach yourself to have fun doing whatever you're doing. I mean, part of that, I'm outgoing, I like people, so I liked waiting tables. I did really well at it. I did really well at bartending. And anyway, out of school for 2 years. And while I was doing that, like, I grew up a little bit, right? And I realized, like, as much as I like bartending and I like waiting tables, maybe I should go back to school. So I did. Um, I actually went on I went down to visit some friends that were at school. And this would have been, I think it was Christmas. It would have been Thanksgiving ish of 99. And they have something at the school called the bike trip. So the bike trip is a psychology class where you bicycle, like pedal bicycle, from San Francisco to Tijuana, and then Tijuana to Phoenix. And you do this over
Wow.
January.
Okay.
Well,
And
the whole
yeah, go
point
on.
is it's small group psychology. So they put you in a group of 5 or 6 people. You carry all your stuff on your bike. You camp almost every night. You stay in some churches and a few like high schools and stuff like that. But winter in mid Ohio is not somewhere that you want to be. There's no skiing. There's very little skiing. It's cold. It's miserable. It's wet. They don't plow the roads very well. So the psychology teacher at this college, Dr. Randy Kronk was his name, put together this bike trip, and they did it every year. So I went down to visit some friends, and 2 of my friends were going on this trip. So I went to like their meeting with them, because I was like, well, whatever, I'm going to go to this meeting with you. And the guy at the meeting, Dr. Kronk, was like, well, do you want to go? And I said, yeah, I'd love to. And he said, cool. I think it was $2,000. if I remember. It might have been 2,100, somewhere in there. He was like, cool, if you can get me a check within the next 2 or 3 weeks, you can come on the trip. It'll be great. So I went back home. I told my mom I was going. She was worried because, I mean, riding your bike 1,800 miles is a little scary, I guess, for a parent. But she was like, okay, she understood by this point, like she's not controlling me. I definitely had a mind of my own. She also knew I was pretty adventurous. And I think she was happy that I was doing something with the school. On that trip, I realized like I was spending time with my friends who I'd met in college. And I realized like I should probably go back to school. Like I realized that I started to see the difference between people who were thinking about how to make more money, start a business, do something different. And my friends that worked in the restaurant industry, which every night was, finish work, drink as much as we can, get 4 hours of sleep, show up the next morning. So I was like, okay, that seems like a good idea. So I went back to school the next year, ended up doing really well. I did a semester abroad, I did a semester in Italy as a fine art major. I was fine art and psychology were my majors. Ended up
You
doing
majored in fine art and psychology. Like
correct.
it was one major, not two.
No, it was 2 majors.
Two majors. Okay.
2 majors.
So you went from waiting tables back. You dove in fully.
Yes. Yep. I went back to school and I was like, well, what do I like doing? Well, first I thought I was going to do education. I actually went and I volunteered for a year, for that first year, in a 5th grade classroom, and it was horrible. It wasn't horrible because of the kids. The kids were great. The teacher was great. What was horrible is I learned that our school system is horridly broken in the US. It doesn't teach kids how to do anything, and it definitely doesn't teach them to like think creatively. Instead, it forces them into a very, very rigid framework, which doesn't serve them.
It doesn't seem to be getting better.
No, it's getting worse. And actually, in having conversations with the teacher who ran the classroom, I learned that it was getting worse. And I was like, well, I'm not going to bang my head against the wall for the rest of my life trying to teach kids. So I wanted to be an art teacher.
Which is tragic, really, because if they say that I guess it's a similar observation to the one neither of us could fully remember, but you put a great person in a poor system, you end up with poor results. And you would have been a great teacher for many great kids over the years, but you saw the system and it drove you away pretty rapidly. You grasped it fast.
Yeah. Oh, well, so what happened was I went back to school and I was talking to the guidance counselor and I said, I want to be an art teacher. And they had, so my GPA at the time, because my first year I wasn't fully engaged, was about a 1.8. And they said, well, you can't go into the education program without a 3.0. And I said, well, wouldn't it be more important that I actually love what I do and I connect with kids? No, you have to have this. And I said, well, screw you guys. I'm going to go volunteer. So I went and volunteered. And I was like, the teacher told me, she was like, you'd be great. But she was like, you're just going to bang your head against the wall and you're going to hate it. And I was like, well, why would I do that? So I was in art classes. I was like, well, I'm going to finish my art degree because I enjoy it. But how do you make money as an artist, right? Like you have very limited options to make a good living. And money has always been important to me. My mom sat me down. It was right after the divorce. I think I shared this story with you, but right after the divorce, my mom sat me down. I was throwing a fit in the mall because I wanted a pair of Air Jordans. I think they were $98. And
how old were you?
8 or 9. Mm-hmm. And I wanted these Air Jordans. I remember sitting on the bench like, and my mom was like, we don't have money for things like that. If you want those, you need to go get a job. And I think she said it in passing, but I went home, like the whole way home, I was like, what am I going to do? I need to make money. So I went home and I that day got the lawnmower out of the garage and just walked down the street knocking on doors. And the next day I had the money to go buy Air Jordans. So I rode my bike to the mall, bought the Jordans and came home with them. And my mom was like, what? And I was like, yeah. And I just started mowing yards and raking leaves and hustle, everyone on my street and like the 2 or 3 streets around me knew who I was because I was always knocking on doors saying, "Hey, do you need your leaves raked? Do you need your car washed? Do you need your yard mowed? Do you need stuff done?" And my mom was like, "Well, she can't she didn't know what to do because I think she would have never done that, right? That's not her response to this challenge." But she was just like, "Well," and she didn't know whether to be supportive or to quiet me down or what to do. So after a couple weeks, she was like, "Well, you need to go pay for the gas." So I went and bought a gas can and I walked to the gas station that was, a couple blocks away and gave them like $20 to fill up the gas can, whatever it was, $10, and like came home. And my mom was just, I don't think she knew what to do. But between that and then just like anything, I just got really comfortable with that, which I mean, I was outgoing already, but I think looking at later, becoming a waiter and a bartender, like I waited tables and I made more money than my manager. I remember my manager sat me down when I was 17 because I worked at Ponderosa, and a normal section at Ponderosa was 8 tables. And if you've never been to a Ponderosa, it's an all-you-can-eat buffet, and you can order a steak or chicken or shrimp that comes from the grill. And the way that it works is you sit down at the table, you pay at the front, they give you a ticket and a little like table tent, right? And your server is just responsible for getting you drinks, clearing your plates, and bringing you whatever you ordered from the grill. Most people who waited tables there made maybe $1 per table. Well, I looked at it as, how can I help these people? So a lot of people came in with kids. I learned some simple magic. I learned how to pull a quarter from behind a kid's ear. I learned how to juggle, and I learned how to grab attention. Like if you stand in the middle of a couple kids and you snap at them and you start snap your fingers, start juggling, they all look at you. And then I would carry around a can of like whipped cream, and I'd give them a bowl of whipped cream and put it on the table. Parents loved me because a lot of them would bring large families, 3, 4, 5 kids. They're on date night. Like they're trying to like just, keep their crap together. And like I would entertain their kids for 30 seconds and the kids would sit down and eat, or I'd go make a hot fudge sundae with them, or like I could do that. Well, what
Take them
happened?
into the kitchen.
Maybe.
Oh, I mean, where'd you make it? At the table?
You can't, well, because if you take a kid into the kitchen and he slips and falls or messes up.
No, I'm trying to, you said I would take them to make a hot fudge sundae. So that at the table?
Hot fudge. Gotcha. Hot fudge sundae is a Sunday bar. There's a Sunday bar, but I would be like, come with me.
Take them to the bar. Got it. Okay.
Yeah. The other thing that I did was, a normal section was 8 tables. Well, I learned if I memorized everybody's ticket, I could take twice as many tables. And they didn't believe that I could do this at first, but I did it. I was 15 years old when I started there, and I did it within 2 or 3 months. I just learned, like I literally read or heard somewhere about like using phonetics, right, to remember things. I just started training my brain to do it, and I got to the point that I could memorize everybody in the restaurant. I could memorize their stuff. So I started taking a double section. So I would have 16 tables where other people would have 8. And I would literally wear running shoes and like run around the restaurant. But this was mid 90s. This was the mid 90s. So I sat down one Saturday and I made about $700 in a day. And my manager was like, I don't make that much money. And I was like, I don't know what to tell you. You can wait tables. And this was the start of, so for most of you out there, just so you know, the managers in the restaurants don't make as much as the servers, or they make about the same. The servers usually do better with way less responsibility. This was true at Applebee's. This was true in fine dining as I got older. Anyway, we're way down a rabbit hole with
Is
waiting.
that because of tips, or
Tips are just, you manage as a whole. Restaurants make about 10% profit. So if they're making, let's say they do $1 million a year, that means that the restaurant is making about $100,000. That's a very skinny profit margin. They don't pay their management well. Management, and what they sell you as management, is you get to be in charge of everybody. which some people that appeals to, right? Like 1 out of 10 is like, yes, I want that. But most of them do not make that much money. They make somewhere 50 to 75K a year. Most servers, if you're good as a server, you're going to make that serving or bartending. That's I would say most servers make about the same as their managers with way less responsibility. I mean, you show up, you talk to people, you run some food around. But this is also why restaurants are notorious for having bad management. They don't train your management's never trained in restaurants unless you work for Let Us Entertain You or a good restaurant group. They don't put money into training managers. They literally, we do it's called sink or swim. Here, you get to be the manager, figure it out. And it's like, well, what? Okay. That's a whole different story, but doesn't have anything to do with marketing. Are you enjoying this episode? Do you want to know how you can tell better stories and use story selling in your business? Check the description down below for my free story selling course. This blueprint gives you everything you need to start using story selling in your business. All right, let's jump back to the episode.
Well, so you learned how to grab attention, and that is something that I imagine served you in many ways, and that's evolved ever since.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. So waiting tables, I waited tables through college. I went abroad. I spent a semester in Italy. When I came back, I was, first off, like, if you haven't traveled abroad, if you have not, Dove, you get this right away. Opening up your thought process and I don't even know what to say. Like, it just changes your perspective so drastically because you learn that the world is really, really big. Like, there's so many differences, and that our existence, our view on something is not binary. Like, I am sure we agree on a lot of things. I'm sure we disagree on a lot of things. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It matters if I like you as a person and if I believe you have integrity, right? In America, there's such a problem with this around whether it's racial lines or whether it's political lines or religious lines. But the thing at the end of the day, it's so interesting to me that their thought, the modern thought, which I believe is wrong, is no one should have an opinion on anything, right? Like, you should be whatever. It's fine. I don't have strong opinions. I don't want to enforce my opinion. That puts everyone in a victim mentality, which I think is 100% wrong. Instead, 30 years ago, you could have a Republican and a Democrat sit at the same table. They could share their views openly, and they could have a conversation about something else, right? Tolerance, acceptance. You know what? You may not agree with me, but I love you regardless. You're a good person. We'll get along. We may not agree on everything. Awesome. Nowadays, it has switched to, you don't agree with me, you're wrong, I hate you, die. Like, that's been, and it's like, that's such a horrible way to view anything in the world. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, it's you mentioned earlier that people are not learning, kids are not learning how to think. They're being taught what to think, not being taught how to think. And, we can go down that rabbit hole, but,
yeah,
probably our time is spent on other things. So great. So you went to Italy. You were there for a year studying.
Studied
fine art.
Got to see all kinds of great stuff. Got to eat amazing food. Had enough gelato to, oh my goodness, gelato's so good. Anyway, when I came back, so it exposed me to all this like different thinking, and like I met a bunch of expats. I met people from around the world. Exposed me to all this different thinking, and then on the plane ride back, somebody gave me Rich Dad Poor Dad. Robert Kiyosaki book. If you haven't read it, it is the gateway drug for entrepreneurship. Somebody gave it to me and they said, "Hey, I think you'd really enjoy this." And I think we had talked a little bit at the time. My plan was to go. I wanted to actually run homeschools. um, I was I was playing around with this idea of Montessori schools and like how I still wanted to teach people, but I wanted to do it privately so that I could charge enough money to make it viable and actually do things my way. Um, but I had talked
And
about
not
I
be
want to buy
told
a
that you couldn't
duplex.
because of
Yeah,
some,
exactly.
grade. I don't know what your GPA was by the time you finished, but there are a lot of silly criteria.
Yes. The so my GPA was actually quite a bit better. I graduated with like a 3.8, 3.9. Um, because when
Oh,
I came back, my
that's
attitude had
remarkable.
changed. Well, that's yeah. I
Did
mean, my attitude had completely
I
changed. Plus,
you had to live with your previous your earlier GPA, right? I mean, you had that was averaged in. I don't know exactly how that works because it doesn't
yeah.
sound possible to get that high. Like, how
Oh
can you
no.
start with
I
a
mean,
one point whatever?
it was one credit, or it was 1 year of classes. Most of those classes I retook. Um,
I see.
if, I mean, if you fail a
So it
class, you need to
replaced your
retake it.
original.
Yeah,
Got it. Okay.
correct. I
Otherwise, I
think I
mean, you'd have
had.
to be way above four.
Well, I mean, it's also very. I mean, your college was a long time ago for me, but the first year of classes, I think I maybe had maybe 20 credits. I had to retake half of those classes, and the classes I didn't retake weren't that heavy weighted, right?
It
By the time
might be obvious from my questions, but I did not go to college.
it's all good. Um, anyway, I came back. I had talked to the guy who lended me Rich Dad Poor Dad, and we had talked about real estate investing. And I said, well, my goal would be to retire down the road, own a duplex or own a triplex, that pays some income so that I have a solid retirement. Um, so he gave me this book, and I got off the plane thinking about, okay, maybe I need to buy a duplex or a triplex or some kind of investment real estate. Not not like a whole bunch of thought, but it was an interesting book, and I knew I needed to do it. So I went back to at the time Applebee's, which is where I worked, and I wanted my job back, and they didn't have a spot for me. So I started picking up shifts, and the way I would do it is I would go into the restaurant at 4 o'clock. That's when everybody shows up. Everybody comes on the clock at 4:30 for a night shift. And I would just say, who wants to go home? I'll work your shift. I'm happy to work. Well, the manager started getting pissed off about this because he would make the schedule based on people he wanted to work with. And then I would show up and I would mess it up. And it was more of a power trip for him than anything because he didn't like that I was doing this. And he said, we don't like nobody's quitting. And now people are complaining about not making enough money because you're taking their shifts. And I was like, I'm not taking their shifts. They're offering them to me. And what it is people show up hungover, tired, whatever. And they would want to go home. And then they would be like, oh, dude, that guy made $200 instead of me making $200. And then, so it led to this weird thing. So that went on for maybe, I don't know, a month or two. And then they fired me. They were like, you can't do this anymore. You're done. And we don't want you working here anymore, because I guess I've always challenged kind of status quo. So I went home and I was still in school. This was my junior year of school. And I was like, well, okay. I want to buy a duplex and I'm going to start a business all in the same day. I'm going to start a business all in the same day. So I went home and I started cleaning. I started with cleaning houses. So I talked to a couple of my professors and I started cleaning their houses. Quickly, that led to me cleaning churches. One of the professors was on the board at their church, and he said, hey, we need somebody to clean our church. So I went and got bonded and got insurance and ended up cleaning churches. I cleaned one church. So I was getting paid $500 a week to clean a church, which took me 4 hours, versus a house, which paid like a third of that. So started cleaning houses, then churches, and then banks. Because I was bonded and insured, I took out an ad in the newspaper. There were still papers back then. And a bank called me to come in and give them a quote, and my quote was, I guess, way less than they were paying a commercial cleaning crew that wasn't doing a good job. So I had two churches and four banks. The bank had four branches around town. Um, I was making really good money doing that. And then I ended up I started talking about investment real estate. And the guy who owned the building that I lived in was an 8-unit building with 2 commercial units down front. So 10 units total. And the guy who owned it ended up saying, I talked to him about buying a duplex or a triplex. And he said, well, why don't you just buy the building that you're in? And he ended up holding the mortgage on it, and I ended up buying it. And before you knew it, I had 53 units across 14 different buildings, because I can't just do anything halfway. But that was 2004. It was when I was at my peak, and I just decided 2005, I was really burned out. Because I'd spent about 3 or 4 years building all this up. I was still cleaning. I had a clothing store in there for a while. I like just jumped in. All of that led to me getting really burned out, and really tired. And I was just like, I think it's time. I had a tenant that was giving me a really hard time that I had to evict, and going through all that led to this landlord burnout. So I sold everything and traveled for 2 years. I was like, you know what? I'm going to go travel. That's what I wanted to do. That's why I did all this. So I sold everything. I went and traveled. And
Sold in
when I came to,
2005.
late 2005,
All right.
sold
That's
everything.
good. Good you didn't go into 2008 with it, right?
Well, that's it. So I traveled. So late 2007, I'm sitting in Chicago visiting my college roommate, and we were in a bar downtown. We were at Smith and Lewinsky, which is downtown, prominent steakhouse. And we were sitting at the bar, and the manager was behind the bar complaining about somebody that didn't show up. And he was like, I need a bartender. Rah, rah, rah. There's no one in this town. And I was like, if you need a bartender, I was like, I'll show up. When do you need a bartender? And he told me to show up on Monday. He was like, buy a tuxedo, show up on Monday. His his name was Matty Moore. If you look him up on YouTube, oh my goodness, he's a riot. Horrible manager, really entertaining, just crazy. So I show up on Monday, and he didn't remember hiring me. He had been blackout drunk, which is also normal in the restaurant industry. But he was like, well, whatever, you're here and I need a bartender, so you're bartending tonight. Well, that led to me working in fine dining in Chicago. And then eventually led to me working in fine dining in Vail. I wanted to move to Vail, Colorado. I wanted to work at a ski resort. I lived in Chicago for about 2 years, and loved it, and then hated it, because it's very isolating. You also work a gazillion hours to pay for it. And I lived downtown. It was great until it wasn't. And then, ended up talking to Vail Resorts for a different job. And then they came back to me and said, hey, we would really like you to do this to help us grow our fine dining program. You have a lot of experience. So I ended up in Vail, and Vail was great. Absolutely loved working for them. So you get 3 months off a year. You get 2 months off in the spring and 1 month off in the fall. So we'd always go travel. Like, it allowed me to go travel. We took trips all over the world: Asia, Central America, South America, Japan. Like, got to travel all over, see a ton of stuff. Got to ski a lot, got to hang out in a really cool town, get to know some really good people. Absolutely loved my time in Vail.
What years are we talking about now? Vail from when to when?
Late 2008 to 2014.
Got it. So Vail, ski town, Colorado, and
Yeah,
3 months off a year to travel the world. That sounds good.
it
And
is a great job.
and what did you start off as? They recruited you to do what?
So I was kind of, it was like a hybrid position. They didn't really have, what they had was they had a fine dining restaurant that had stopped performing.
Hmm.
It had stopped doing well. And they said, what we want is we want somebody to come in and be like a hybrid maitre d slash head server slash dining room manager. And I said, okay, no problem. Like I can do that. Um, so I ended up like I basically took over training. I trained on wine, I trained on drinks, and I trained on customer service. And then I also took all the VIPs that came in. So all the people that would come in. I don't know how to explain it to somebody who's not in the restaurant industry. Like they make reservations and usually they have a concierge from American Express make the reservation or their assistant make the reservation. You know that their expectations are a little bit different. They're looking for a different class of service. They're looking for just a different experience. So I would get 99% of those people. They would make sure we're in my section because the thing with fine dining is you're paying. I mean, our at the time when I got there, we were $300 a plate plus wine plus alcohol, plus tip, plus the whole thing. Right? You can go eat down the village. We were on mountain dining, so you had to take the gondola up and a snow cat in. You could eat down in the village for $100 a person easily, probably $50 if you wanted to. Um, so when people are paying 3 to 5 times the normal dinner price, you've got to offer an experience that is something different. And so like you need to know the food, you need to know the wine, you need to know the alcohol, you need to know the whole thing. But beyond that, you have to build a really quality experience. And quality experience depends on the guest, not on me. Who are they? Where are they from? What are they looking for? How can I make their night memorable, fun, and an experience that Vail's tagline is the experience of a lifetime.
I
And they,
I assume it takes more than disappearing a quarter or a bowl of whipped cream.
yeah, yes, it does. Um,
Or since you were also the manager, were any of the other server staff kind of jealous that you were, getting the VIPs? Was that an issue?
well, so I didn't manage that. I wasn't in charge of the restaurant at the time. That came later. So I started off that year as they just introduced me as a head server. This guy has background. So the restaurant that I worked at in Chicago was the number 2 restaurant in the world at the time. So I had the chops, right? I had the background to do it. And they knew that I was training. The other thing is in Vail at that restaurant, we were what's called a pooled floor. So all the tips went into one pool and they got divided amongst everybody who worked that night. Um, so that actually led to a good thing. It created a lot of teamwork, a lot of camaraderie. I love restaurants like that because everybody there usually has a higher standard of service. Um, so they didn't mind at all because I would take the VIPs and we call it styling them out. Like I would just take care of them in a way that no one else could. And they loved that I did that. I also trained. So, I mean, part of this was I trained everyone else there to start doing the same things I did.
Got
And
it.
this led to, we took the restaurant when we started in 2008. We were rated 37 out of about 55, 60 restaurants in Vail. They had really fallen off. By 2012, we were the number 3 restaurant in Vail.
Wow. And
Um,
the,
but
had the food changed? Had the environment changed? It was just the people.
the food changes a little bit. I mean, it changes seasonally, but the main thing was the service. Because, like I said, when people are paying $300 to $500 for dinner per person,
Hmm.
they're expecting an experience. And what they were delivering prior my arrival, I mean, I didn't dine there, so I don't know for sure. But prior my arrival, what they were getting was food.
Hmm.
By 2012, they were getting an experience. They were coming to the top of a mountain. They were having a lot of fun. They were building something that literally did last a lifetime. Um,
Two questions.
yeah.
First of all, you said that in restaurants where the tips are pooled, they tend to attract better quality people, better quality servers. Uh, are they attracting better people, or is there something about the teamwork inspired by the pool? Is it more systemic, or like what's the?
So they're not attracting better servers. What happens is if you're if you're at a restaurant where there is not a pooled floor, where it's each server's for himself, if I run past the table, if I'm walking past the table and I see they need wine, or I see they need their plates cleared, or they have a question, I'm going to, for the large part, ignore that as a normal person because I have my 4 or 5 tables that I
Mhm.
have to worry about. In
Right.
a pooled floor, if I walk by somebody's table and they need something, I am going to at least, at the bare minimum, stop and make the guest feel heard. In fine
Right.
dining, I'm going to do whatever they need because in fine dining, it's set up completely different. You have like 3 servers per table, right? You have a head server, a back server, and a busser. Um,
That's an example of the opposite of what we talked about with the school, where you can take an average person, put them in a great system where the incentives are aligned properly, as
mhm.
opposed to against the goals, like in schools. And then you have average people performing above average.
Yeah. The, I mean, restaurants, what ends up happening in a pooled floor is everybody works together and the people who are bad apples, the people who are not a good fit, weed themselves out because we had it happen every year. We would hire a couple. We'd hire in that restaurant, we had between 25 and 30 front of house servers. And so we'd hire 30 and about 4 or 5 would just not work out. They would show up and you would see that they were not the right fit. They weren't taking care of people the right way. They didn't have a team camaraderie. But we wouldn't even really have to fire them. Usually they would just see that they didn't fit in and they would leave, which is great. Um, and that was how we built that restaurant. I mean, over 5 and 6 years to be something that was amazing.
Now, you said a few times that people were having an experience.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think these guests would say? They leave, they go down the mountain, they go home to wherever they flew in from, and they're describing that evening. They're describing the experience. Do you know what they might say?
I mean, I have letters still. I still occasionally get an email from people. I mean, I haven't worked there since 2014, and I'll still occasionally, I would say two
We're,
or three
we're
times a
mid
year.
2021 right now, in case that gets lost somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I still occasionally get an email. I would say 3 or 4 times a year, I get an email from somebody. Hey, we're coming to Vail. Wondering if you still work there. Is there anything like, can we like, are we going to see you? Blah, blah, blah. I mean, so I got to take care of Michelle Obama, and she wrote a letter saying, everybody always takes care of us when we go out, but you actually, what I had done was I Googled at the time, I looked up some stuff that was going on so that I had conversation points with her. And I looked at stuff that was going on, not like political stuff that she wouldn't want to talk about, but like stuff about her kids. Um, so I got a letter from her. Some of the other people that would come in, they would say, so it was usually a 5 to 8 course dinner, depending on the night. I would make sure that people tried food that they maybe normally wouldn't try by just bringing it to the table. They would order whatever they ordered, but then I would bring them something extra. So at the time, not a lot of people knew what pork belly was. Um, Pork belly, if you still don't know what it is like the best bacon you've ever had. It's super thick cut bacon, prepared slightly differently, but it's just amazing. So ours was done. I can still remember the preparation of it, right? So we oven roasted it for 24 hours. We pan seared it in a Japanese barbecue sauce and then placed it on a apple compote with a slice of poached pear. Absolutely amazing. Um, it was the best thing on the menu, but not everybody would order it because they didn't know what it was. So I just make sure to bring it. I would put one, and I would make sure, like, we would do like a half order, which would be like 2 bites, and I would make sure everybody on the table got some. And I wouldn't usually tell them what it was unless I knew that they didn't eat pork. Because if you say pork belly, like, people at the time didn't know what it was. This is 2009, 2010. Um, so we do that. We would greet them with champagne. That was one of the things that we started doing, and we didn't mention that anywhere. So they'd come to the top, they'd get off the snowcat, they would walk in. A normal restaurant, what do? You check in at the host desk, you maybe have a seat. Well, they would check in at the host desk. We would have them sit at our bar, which overlooked the entire Vail Village, like sparkling lights, right? If you've never been to Colorado, especially at 10,000 feet, our restaurant was at 10,000 feet. You're looking at like the clearest night sky you've ever seen. We greet them by name. Hello, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. How are you doing this evening? Your table is just getting prepared. While we're hanging out for a second, here's some champagne for you. We'd love for you to go outside, toast the night sky. I know it's a little bit cold out there. We have some heaters, but if you just take a moment and step outside, I think you'll really, really enjoy it. How many places like greet you like that? Sometimes we take them outside. If I wasn't busy, I'd walk outside with them. We tried to do a little bit of research on every table that came in, so we knew something about them, at least where they were from. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, I see that you're joining us from Sacramento in Northern California. Weather's a little bit colder here, but I guarantee you don't have night skies like these. Why don't you step outside with me for a second? Here you go. Here's some champagne for you. People love that, right? Like, oh my goodness. So like it's a pre-frame. You're starting them off on the right foot. If they didn't drink champagne, we had no big deal. I have sparkling apple cider for you, or can I get you something else you'd really enjoy drinking? Sometimes we do like half sparkling apple cider, half pineapple juice. So it's not as sweet, but like you do all kinds of different things. Just make their night. We would also take notes on them. So this is something I started at the beginning of my time there. If you're using a software system, we would all call it a CRM in marketing speak, right? For restaurants, though, reservation system has a notes tab. Well, we started taking notes on people. What did they order? What did they like? What did they not like? And this is something that you would see happen. In Vail, a lot of times people would come for 2 weeks per season to ski. We would see them year after year. Well, starting year one, we would take notes. What did they like? What did they didn't like? What was their drink? Where are they from? Things they talked about. And we put those in this database. When they'd show up the next year, how's little Susie doing? Did she enjoy her tennis lessons? Stuff like that. And they would be like, you remember that? Well, I'm not telling you that I wrote it down, right? I'm just telling you I reviewed it. But people would get, that's why I still get letters. People remember that, right? And
so you and others would sit down, earlier in the day and review the reservations and look up the notes. And did anyone else have? Are you still skilled at memory like you used to be?
Pretty much. It's not quite as sharp. I'm in my mid 40s now, so it's in my memory.
You did train it, and I guess if you taught yourself that, then I could learn it too, I suppose, right? I mean,
everybody can learn it. I mean, it's literally just
takes effort.
Yeah, effort, and you have, it has to be something that's important to you. But the way we would do it is. So everyone who came into the restaurant had to have a reservation. It was a reservation only restaurant. So we know something about them. We have their name, we have their contact info, we have their stuff. I would, and what I trained everybody to do is just write down 1 or 2 little things that you hear, as well as their order, and all of that gets saved, right? Like not their entire order, but their main course. If they really liked something, right? If they really liked the wine, if they really liked the pork belly, something like that. The whole thing it was all about building experience, getting to know people. And that changed that restaurant because people started to notice that very quickly. And that's the whole, I remember one of the first year there, I got in a huge argument with the chef because the chef made foie gras ice cream. So foie gras is fatty duck liver. It is great with a steak. It did not work all that well as ice cream, but I understand he was being creative. It's totally fine, whatever. I had a guest who just didn't like it. Like, it came out and he didn't like it. And I took it back to the kitchen, and the chef, he was passionate. He wasn't trying to be too difficult, but he was like, no, that's what I made. That's what goes with this course. That's what they're eating. And I was like, look, man, it's about their experience. It's not about what you want to do. You can try that, but if they still say no, if they've tried it, which he did, the dude tried it, he didn't like it. Let's give him something he likes, because it's more about him leaving saying that was amazing than they tried to make me eat foie gras ice cream and it tasted like crap. But chefs, like, this translates directly to marketing, because there's so many marketers out there who say, nope, this is how I do it, and this is how they're going. Like, it's ego-based marketing. It's me, me,
Right.
me, me. That's not what it's about. It's about your customer saying, oh my goodness, that person gets me, that person likes me, that person can help me get that outcome. Yeah.
And like, like you've been saying, the word experience, it's an experience.
The whole
It's
thing.
creating- yeah.
So go ahead.
Was that argument going on while the customer was waiting outside? Is there was
Well, so what ended up happening from it, the guy's name was Jason. And Jason was like, I'm not doing it. And I said, well, all right, cool. So I went behind the line and made my own dessert for the guy. Like, I knew what to make. I knew where everything was. And Jason, like, is yelling at me. And I walk out to the guy's table and I put it down. So we had a poached pear bread pudding that was amazing. It came with salted caramel gelato that we made in house. And the guy told me, he was like, I just have a real sweet tooth, and like, this ice cream is more like a savory. And he knew food. So I was like, okay, I got you. Like, that's all I said, right? I said, I totally got it. And I brought him this. I described it to him, and I was like, tell me what you think. If it's not right, we'll keep doing something else. And here's some, I can't remember the wine. It was a Saltern. So dessert wine. I was like, it pairs great with it. Enjoy. Like, totally made his night. And he was like, this is exactly what I wanted. So Jason's in the back, like, sulking. And I just ignored Jason till the end of the night. And then I pulled him aside and I was like, dude, it's not about, like, your name's on the menu and people are coming in enjoying your food. But if they really don't like it, it's our job to give them something that they do like and that resonates with them. And I think he kind of understood it. I mean, they, unfortunately, in chef school, they teach you, like, it's your job to put your spin on things. Well, that's true up until a point. If they're not having a good time, if the guest isn't having a good time, it's better to send them. We always said, send them down the mountain smiling. So that was the other thing that we did. We made sure to walk guests to the door leaving. So when they got up to leave, well, we would pull out their chair for them. When they would sit down, we'd pull out their chair for them. We'd push it in, make sure they have a nice night, right? I still do that when I go on dates, and you'd be surprised how many women are like, they've never had that done for them. They don't know what to do with themselves. That's a different story. But we'd walk them to the door. Then they're taking a snowcat down the mountain. Then they're taking a gondola down to the bottom. So we would send them down with hot chocolate, hand warmers, like, make them leave on cloud 9, because that's when they're thinking all of that stuff. You asked some really good questions, because that's like, this is stuff nobody at the time was thinking about. Now restaurants have kind of caught on. That you'd be surprised how many of them are still super lazy and don't do this stuff. But we did everything in our power to make them talk about the meal. We even went so far, if I knew they had a dinner reservation at another restaurant, if they were a VIP, I would call the other restaurant. Sorry about that. That's my alarm. I would call the other restaurant and I would get them wine, or I would get them, like, I'd have them greeted with something, or I would do something at another restaurant for them. And that's also kind of unheard of, but it makes the other restaurant look like a rock star, and it makes us look good. We did really, really well with that whole thing. But that's what led. Go ahead.
And you started off in the roles that you said, like head server, dining room manager, and I forgot what the other thing was, but combination, right?
Training, yeah.
Training, and then they promoted you over time? I mean, your role changed, I believe.
Yep. I went from that to the manager, and then I went to helping with other restaurants, helping with the training program for all of Vail Fine Dining. And then we started building. So out of this, we started building VIP events. So we had corporations would bring like their C-suite, right? Anywhere between like 20 to maybe 100 people, 150 people to Vail for events. Well, we started saying, well, what can we do to really blow the socks off of these guys? So we started holding, like take them on a snowmobile trip, take them on snowshoeing, bring them to different places for dinner. Let's do stuff that makes us stand out and really, really wow them. They'll
So you were
spend
thinking
more money.
beyond your restaurant, right? You were thinking beyond your restaurant to veil the experience of being here as a vacation destination.
Correct, but in a corporate setting. So this is no longer thinking like just restaurant. It's
Right.
how can we really, because honestly, how this started, we had a group that came and they rented out our space and um, did a normal corporate event. But I said we need to do the same thing. Like these are like I think it was a group of like 30 or 40 people. So we learned their names and we learned like some stuff about them. We greeted them differently. And like the guy at the end, it was actually the owner of GoPro, um, came up and shook my hand and he was like, we've never been taken care of like this. He was like, this is great. And that got me thinking about like, how can we do this even better next year? How can we make sure that they come back every year and spend a fortune to have an amazing experience? Because that's what corporations, like true like game-changing corporations, especially at that time, were looking for the experiential, like we need to take our group and go do something, get them out of the office. So we started doing like brainstorming events and like building all the stuff that got like taking them ski biking, taking them snowshoeing, doing snowmobile tours, like all of this stuff, and started building that out.
Ski biking?
Ski biking, it's a thing. I'm trying to think how to describe it. Just take the tires of the bike and you replace them with skis. So you're sitting down, you have two handlebars, and you have two skis that are not side by side, but they're one in front of the other. It's kind of fun.
Kind of fun. Okay.
There's
Regular
no pedaling.
skiing? Got it.
It's down the mountain, but it's kind of fun. I mean, it's a different way to experience the mountain. I think it's potentially pretty dangerous, but it's fun at the same time.
Got it. Okay. So 2014 comes and what happens? Like what leads you to move on and where do you go?
Yeah. So I went to a Tony Robbins event. I kind of reached
a Tony Robbins event.
Well, I kind of reached my peak at Vail. I'd gone as far as things were going to go there. I kind of reached my pay grade. And I mean, there just comes a time when you've done what you can. I started like thinking, I want to do more. I want to do something else. And that led to, I went to a Tony Robbins event and I came back. And I was just like, I want to be on stage. I want to be speaking in front of people. And that led to me leaving Vail. I moved to Las Vegas and I decided I was going to hold a live event. So I went down to Treasure Island and I knew enough of the terminology because I've been running all these events and doing BEOs, event orders. I knew how to talk to them. And I said, well, I want the largest ballroom. So I rented the space for 15 to 1,800 people, signed this ginormous contract, just thinking like, yeah, this is easy. This is going to be simple because I knew how to run that side, right? I just thought all the events that I ran at Vail, people showed up because they had booked them. They had come to us. I thought, I'll just hold an event. People will buy. Led to me, I burned through like over $30,000 in marketing and trying to hold this event. Had 2 people register and had to cancel the event, lost all my money. But it was a great learning experience.
That's like a $15,000 cost
Cost
of
per action.
sale, right?
Yeah. Yep. It was I mean, it was that whole thing was
What do you charge for tickets?
well, they started off at 9.97, they dropped to 4.97, then they dropped to 2.97, then they dropped to 97. The two sales that I got were at 2.97, I believe. But it was that whole thing was
You can, you could lose money in every sale, and make it up in volume, right? Not
it
not
was like,
not that.
well, I mean, it's one of the fallacies that marketers believe. People don't buy by price. People could care
Yeah,
less about price. They say it's important, but in reality, price is the third or fourth thing down on the list. The most important thing is, will this get me the result that I want? Number one. Number two, do I trust the person selling it? If those two things are yes, price becomes highly irrelevant. People buy by emotion. This is one of the most understated, most important things of marketing. People buy based on emotion. If you get an emotional response from somebody, positive or negative, they will buy. Even like when I say negative, think about Howard Stern, right? People that like Howard Stern listen for 2 to 3 hours a day. People who hate Howard Stern listen for 4 to 5 because they have an emotional reaction. So they can dislike you, but if they believe that it will get the result that they want, they can still buy. I would go for a positive emotional reaction over negative. But at the end of the day, an emotional reaction is better than vanilla, but nobody gets that.
yeah, got that. Um, I mean, that's true in some industries. I mean, I mean, in terms of some industries having, you got to have that polarizing. You've got to make waves because that's just part of the game.
Yeah.
It's not for everybody. It's not my personality to do that. And you wouldn't want to do that as the head of fine dining at a restaurant in Vale, I imagine.
Well,
But if you're a talk show host, it's part of the game.
let's look at, I mean, if you look at restaurants, look at Gordon Ramsay, right? Hell's Kitchen,
Okay.
polarizing. There are people who do not like his demeanor. They don't like him as a person, but they still want to eat his food, right?
Okay. I hear
That's,
you.
I
Good
mean,
point.
that's the thought process. You guys are getting to know Dove a little bit here during this interview process. I mean, you definitely take care of people. You're a quality over quantity, and you want to make sure that people have a great experience. That is good and polarizing in and of itself, because there are people out there that will argue and say you need to have quantity over quality, or you can have both. I don't believe you can have both. You can have one or other. You can't have both.
Hmm.
I don't believe it. You can't show me one business that has both. Um, the the idea is that you're willing to take a stand on something, and not everybody
Yes,
is going to agree with that stance, and that
absolutely.
is 100% okay.
Got it. I completely agree. So you burned through $30,000 to acquire two customers at a cost of $299 each, and you said you learned a lot. So what did you learn, and what did you do next?
Well, I mean, I learned that people don't
And by the
just
way, what
show
were you
up.
going to talk about? What was, you said you want to do public speaking. What were you, how was it a multi-day event that you were promoting? What was it meant to be? And
So
what were you going to talk about?
it was a 2-day event. It was called the Ultimate Restaurant Summit. I wish I still have screenshots of the web page somewhere. Um, the Ultimate Restaurant Summit. I had 18 people speaking. So I basically reached out to everyone that I knew in restaurants, and I said, "Hey, like, this is what not to do for an event." I just said, "Hey, like, we're going to throw an event. Come speak." No topics, no headlines. Which is why nobody bought, right? There's no outcome. I wasn't offering any kind of outcome. Um, 18 speakers. I was going to speak on customer service, but that was literally the title, like ultimate customer service. Why does anyone want? They don't want ultimate customer service. They want ultimate customer retention. How to charge more prices. Like, I know all these things now, but I didn't know them then. So I learned that the big takeaway that I then learned from Dan Kennedy, but it is definitely the big takeaway, is it's not about the thing that you're doing. It is about the marketing of the thing that you're doing. It's not about having a restaurant. It's about marketing the restaurant. It's not about holding an event. It's about marketing the event. It's not about the thing. It's about the marketing of the thing. Because without the marketing,
What does that mean? Because you didn't say what I expected you to say. I thought that you were going to say it's not about the thing. I thought you were going to say it's about the outcome, which you
it is
mentioned
about
earlier.
the outcome. The outcome is what drives the marketing, right? Why do people buy something? It's because they're looking for the outcome. So your marketing all has to be outcome derived. What is the outcome? So if I would have ran the restaurant event on how to double the amount of reservations, triple your income, and hire better employees, right? If I just off the top of my head, that is way better marketing than what I had at the time. Instead, at the time, I was just talking about it's the ultimate restaurant summit. What does that even mean? It doesn't mean anything. We have 18 speakers. Who cares? Nobody cares about any of that stuff. But that's what, if I went back to the
Right.
marketing that I was sending at the time, that was all the marketing. So my takeaway was
Wait.
that I needed outcomes.
hmm
I needed to have better marketing that was driven off of the outcomes.
The way I talk about it is, and it's the same idea, very much the same. I I also studied Dan Kennedy, Jay Abraham, and I don't remember who else back in the early days. And I kind of distilled things I learned from them or wherever, I don't remember. And just with my own experience, I realized that the first job in marketing is to get the attention and interest of your ideal client or customer. You've got to get their attention and their interest. And I realized that attention and interest are not the same thing. A lot of things could get attention. Loud noise will get your attention. And then you go back to what you were doing, right? You can pass, maybe you're at a convention or a conference and you're passing through the exhibitor booth. A lot of things might get your attention, but in order to get your interest means that you say, we're walking through these booths and you say, hey, Dove, let's go over there and have a look, right? So you change your plans. You change course. You're going straight and we turn left or right so that we can see, wait, that gets not just our attention, but our interest. And that's what we're trying to get. We want to get someone's attention about the summit, whatever it was called, whatever you would have called it. And then interest that they say, well, I was planning to be home this weekend, but instead I'm going to go to Vegas for this event. And I realized that, well, what is it that gets people's attention and interest? And I realized that it's only two things. If you talk about a problem they have and don't want, or if you talk about a result they want and don't have. And that's the same thing you're talking about. And that was the big, looking backwards, right? That was the big lesson, is that I wasn't talking about a problem they had and don't want. I wasn't talking about a result they want and don't have. I was talking about something that I was excited about, like that you're passionate about. It was like your foie gras ice cream,
Right.
in a sense.
That's very,
And
very,
people were going to eat it.
yep. That is exactly it. We could go for a long time talking about that, but I think that when people aren't selling, when people aren't having a successful business as a coach or a consultant, it's because of this. Even like as far as like dentists, chiropractors, any service provider, anyone who is selling, if they're not getting the results that they want, it's because they're not focusing on that. I would agree.
Yeah, they're not focusing on, meeting the customer where they are, and people are where they think they are, right? So, and what are we all thinking about? We're only thinking about a problem that we have and don't want, or a result we want and don't have. A result breaks down into a change we want and don't have, an experience we want and don't have, right?
Yeah.
And you were giving experiences at the restaurant in Vail, and people will come to your event if you can solve their problem, get their result. So that was really good. So you did something remarkable though, that you came out of a corporate job, which it was, although it was a rather unique corporate job. You weren't like sitting behind a desk.
Right.
So and you moved on to go to Vegas, and you took this big risk on yourself. And let's now, we may have to do part 2 one day, but let's catch up to where you are now. Now, how did you get from there to where you are now, where you're focused on helping people sell one to many through webinars, I believe, right? I mean, that's I'm sure you do in-person events too. You were doing that until COVID, right? So just give us an accelerated catch up. It's
Sure. I
like we
mean,
were going through
basically,
all the 48 states. You know, I remember reading Travels with Charlie, right? By what's his name?
I haven't read that. I don't know
Travel
what
with
that is.
Charlie. Yeah. Oh, it was a great book. What I remember though is that John. Oh, come on. Yeah. Anyway, I'm sure many people listening could look it up, or they know it rather. I'm not going to try to look it up now. Um, so he goes like the first half of the book or three-quarters of the book is just real slow and detailed, and then I felt like the last part was like rushing through, another 15 states. So I hope that we don't give that feeling now. But what are you doing now? And then perhaps we'll come back another time to fill in some details.
Sure. I mean, basically, I went from that event and I got involved. That led to like me learning marketing. Um, I ended up getting involved with Dan Kennedy and Jay Abraham as well, and then Frank Kern and then Russell Brunson at ClickFunnels. Started holding a lot of live events and speaking on a lot of stages. It was not easy at first, but I just put my head down and I figured it out. Anything worth knowing takes a little while. Um, but over the last like
What
7 years,
wasn't easy?
none of it. I
What
mean,
wasn't easy?
none
For
of it.
example.
I mean, they're getting on people's stages. You have to reach out to a lot of people,
Okay.
especially when you're getting started. Even if you have a speaker reel,
Right.
if you don't have at least 3 or 4 event organizers that are going to vouch for you, you're not going to get on people's stages very easily. Holding events,
So
the
that
next,
initial breakthrough.
yeah,
Yeah.
holding events. That next event that I held, um, after the one that failed, I had to go around. I mean, it was 80 people instead of 15 to 1800. Um, I had to learn how to sell from stage. I had to learn the whole marketing game. I had to learn
Mm-hmm.
copywriting. I had to learn what good advertising looks like. I had to learn how to use follow-up sequences. I mean, I go on and on and on. But then, I mean, that led to me building a very successful business based on helping people get on stage. So 2017, I moved away from selling. At the time, it was Facebook marketing and consulting services, and we moved into helping people hold live events and craft their message for the stage. Because the thing is, if you're not selling, if you're not getting your message out, if you're not getting a wide number of people in the top of your funnel, right? And funnel is a very loose term. It doesn't just mean online. It means if you're not
Mm-hmm.
influencing a large number of people and putting your message out so they can see it and say, "Ooh, I want to know more," or "I don't," you're never going to really break through like the six-figure mark. It's almost impossible because you're not going to be able to get in
Mm-hmm.
front of enough people. So how do you get in front of more people? You need to get your message out. So this could be webinars, this could be live events, this could be speaking on other people's stages, this could be doing group trainings through Zoom. It could be a lot of different things, but you have to
Podcast.
get the message out. Yeah, absolutely. Um,
Podcast. And one thing I know that you talk about a lot or help people with is telling better stories. And anybody who's still listening has heard some great stories from you today. Do you think that it's just that you have unique stories to tell, which is true, I'm sure, to some degree? What do you tell a client of yours who says, "Well, I just don't have any, I mean, interesting stories"? Do you agree with that, or do you say, "Yeah, you're boring, and I can't help you," or do you find that you can pull it out of them somehow?
I do not agree. Do not agree that people don't have great stories. Everybody has good stories. You just, when you're really close to them, you don't see them. I mean, to me, I don't see the stories as being like this groundbreaking thing, right? But I know that other people do. I think that's the difference. Um, Anyone who is not you is going to find things from your life interesting, um,
Mm-hmm.
because we all live, like, we all have a different point of view on stuff. We all have things that are different. We all have stuff that's going on. The key, the key that I would say is have an outcome that people want. If you have an outcome that people want. So when I talk about working for Vail, If I talk about the travel aspect of it, most people that want to travel will think that is a really cool story and they'll want to hear more about it. If people like food, I want to talk about like the great food that we did there. Um, so have an outcome that people want around the story, but everybody has stuff that is interesting and positive and like people want to hear about. You just need to distance yourself just a little bit so that you can get it out.
And then your focus now is on helping people scale with webinars. And there are a lot of people teaching webinars and so on, but there are also a lot of people running restaurants or trying to run restaurants. I imagine that you have taken that same attitude that you brought to getting those Air Jordans, the same attitude that you brought to mowing lawns, same attitude you brought to, going back to school, beginning with the rather unique psychology trip, which I had a lot of questions about that, but we'll have to come back to that another time. Same attitude that you brought to running the restaurants, bartending, and so on. You're able to bring that. Is that something you've been able to apply to the digital, online world of webinars? Is that like, can you really create an experience? What is that like? I'll just say that we are kind of pressed for time, and you and I are both trying to. We're going to wrap it up, but I want to make sure that we can bring in that point here.
Sure.
Are you helping create experiences on a webinar? Is that something you're doing?
Yes. So one of the main things that we have done differently is approach the webinar more like from a live event standpoint. There are a lot of different things that we do. We make them more interactive. We make them very, very story based. So I broke down more than 1,000 webinars at this point, and
Oh, wow.
presentations. Some of them more in depth than others. But I will tell you that a good presentation has more than 50 stories. So those stories, some of them are long, some of them are 10, 15, 20 seconds, but they're all stories. They're all parables. They all get people to picture things and see the experience, and they're much more relational. The biggest thing that I tell people, they're like, what's the one thing that I need to know? Is it's not about what you teach. It's about how you engage people. If you think about, we'll leave with this example, I think. If you think about your favorite teacher from high school or college, and you think about your least favorite teacher taught 3 times as much as your most favorite. And if you are honest with yourself, your favorite teacher, you can still probably remember something that they taught you, whereas everything that the quote bad teacher, boring teacher, the teacher that taught all the time, you probably can't remember much.
Mm-hmm.
That's because the teacher that was your favorite teacher was more engaging and got to know you. It was more about personality and experience than teach. But
And you just demonstrated that. What you just did now, that was a story.
Exactly.
It's a kind of story. It's different than the story of the foie gras ice cream, but it's a kind of story.
Correct.
And the fact that you've broken that down, I think is very valuable. Where can I learn more about what you have?
Yeah, sure. So if you guys have listened to all of this and you want to hear more, we probably will do a part 2, but you can go to storiesthatscale.com. That will get you a storytelling blueprint that you can use. It will help you build any story that you want. If you're interested in webinars, you can go to death2badwebinars.com, death2badwebinars, and that will give you a webinar training that will show you how to build a webinar that is completely different from anything else on the market.
Well, I've registered for that when we spoke first last week. First time we ever talked was a few days ago. Now I'm actually to go look at it closely, because now I have a much richer idea of where it's coming from. And that just really makes it clear to me that I've got a lot to learn. And I appreciate you sharing all that you have. Thank you, Steve.
No problem. It has been my pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to interview me. To everybody listening, thank you guys for tuning in. This has been something a little bit different.
I'm sure it's been very worthwhile.
Awesome. Well, to everybody out there, until our second part of this interview, take action, change lives, make money, and we will see you next time.